Good afternoon, everyone. This is the news with b.c.begley. I am your host, and it's Wednesday, October the 15th, 2025, and here are the top news stories for today. Hamas returned the remains of 4 additional hostages on Tuesday after Israel accused the group of violating the U.S. brokered peace deal and threatened to restrict aid to Gaza. The dispute over the remains of 28 deceased hostages, including 2 Americans, has become the first major crisis of the peace process. Israel insists that returning all bodies is a key part of the agreement, while Hamas claims many are still buried under rubble and difficult to recover. In response to the delays, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered new restrictions on Gaza crossings and aid deliveries, Axios has reported. Meanwhile, the next phase of the deal focuses on Hamas's disarmament and the creation of a new governing body for Gaza, though tensions remain high amid continued violence and executions within the territory. President Donald Trump announced Tuesday that the U.S. military conducted a strike on a suspected drug smuggling vessel off Venezuela's coast, killing 6 people linked to narco-terrorist networks. The operation marks the 5th fatal strike against alleged drug boats in the Caribbean since September, and follows the administration's declaration of a, quote, non-international armed conflict with drug traffickers. A new joint task force under U.S. Southern Command was recently formed to intensify counter-narcotics operations. However, several lawmakers, including Senator Adam Schiff and Tim Kaine, have questioned the legality of the strikes, arguing they lack congressional authorization under the War Powers Act, Fox News has reported. Venezuela has condemned the attacks as attempts at, quote, regime change, and has requested an emergency United Nations Security Council session to address what it calls U.S. aggression. A Border Patrol chase on Chicago's South Side ended Tuesday with the arrest of a driver suspected of being in the United States illegally and the deployment of tear gas against protesters. Federal officials said the driver rammed a Border Patrol vehicle before fleeing and then was apprehended after a short pursuit. As agents made the arrest, a crowd gathered, prompting federal officers to use tear gas for, quote, crowd control, exposing 13 Chicago police officers in the process. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker condemned the agents' actions as, quote, abominable, citing recent incidents where federal officers used tear gas and rubber bullets on peaceful demonstrators, the Associated Press has reported. The event comes amid growing protest across Chicago over federal immigration enforcement and calls to strengthen Illinois' sanctuary city protections. President Donald Trump warned Hamas on Tuesday that if the group does not disarm voluntarily, quote, we will disarm them. His remarks came after the release of all 20 surviving hostages held in Gaza, though most of the 28 deceased hostages still remain unrecovered. Under the U.S. brokered deal, Hamas was expected to return all hostages, living and dead, within 72 hours, but the group has said it cannot locate some of the bodies, including those of 2 Americans. President Trump accused Hamas of misrepresenting how many bodies it could return, and said the second phase of the agreement focused on disarmament and has already begun, Fox News has reported. He reaffirmed that the U.S. would back Israel's military efforts if Hamas fails to surrender its weapons. U.S. President Donald Trump awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom to slain conservative activist Charlie Kirk during a White House ceremony on Tuesday. Kirk, who was killed in a September shooting at Utah Valley University, was a major figure in right-wing politics and the founder of Turning Point USA, known for mobilizing young conservatives, and his close alliance with President Trump. The award, presented on what would have been Charlie Kirk's 32nd birthday, was accepted by his widow, Erica Kirk, who praised his faith and dedication while reflecting on his legacy. President Trump lauded Kirk as, quote, unstoppable, and used the occasion to criticize left-wing violence and defend recent National Guard deployments to Democratic-run cities, Fox News has reported. The ceremony drew prominent Trump allies and officials, underscoring Kirk's deep influence within Trump's political movement. Senate Democrats on Tuesday again rejected the GOP-led funding patch, extending the government shutdown beyond 2 weeks. This marks the 8th failed attempt to advance the House-passed measure, with only a few Democrats breaking rank or abstaining, leaving the vote at 49 to 45. Senate leaders say negotiations are ongoing, but progress is stalled without direct involvement from party leadership and the White House. Republicans are considering extending the stopgap deadline into mid-December to allow more time for a long-term funding deal, while Democrats continue to push for linking funding to healthcare priorities, including ACA subsidies, Politico has reported. The standoff leaves no immediate resolution in sight, as both sides leverage votes to pressure the other into negotiations. President Donald Trump pledged a $20 billion currency swap to support Argentina's economy, contingent on the election victory of right-wing President Javier Milei. Milei, who is a self-described anarcho-capitalist, met with President Trump at the White House on Tuesday, where the two leaders emphasized their close political bond. President Trump said the United States would back Milei's economic policies, but indicated no support if Milei loses, criticizing opposing philosophies as incapable of, quote, making Argentina great again. Milei's coalition faces challenges ahead of Argentina's October 26 midterm elections, Al Jazeera has reported. President Trump also publicly endorsed Milei on Truth Social, promising U.S. support during the campaign. Los Angeles County officials voted Tuesday to declare a state of emergency in response to ongoing federal ICE raids, aiming to assist residents financially and legally affected by the actions. The measure, passed 4-1, allows the county to provide rent relief, legal aid, and other services, as well as request state and federal support and expedite contracting to address the crisis. Supervisors said the raids have caused widespread fear, disrupted workplaces, and strained schools, hospitals, and places of worship. County leaders emphasized the declaration enables faster, coordinated action to protect immigrant communities targeted by federal enforcement, ABC News has reported. The emergency status will remain in effect until the board decides to terminate it. Cody Balmer pleaded guilty Tuesday to attempted murder of Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, along with terrorism, arson, burglary, assault, and other charges, for setting fires at the occupied governor's mansion in April. Using gasoline-filled beer bottles, Balmer ignited multiple fires after scaling a security fence and breaking windows, but Shapiro and his family were unharmed. Under a plea deal, he was sentenced to 25 to 50 years in prison, far less than the potential maximum if tried. Balmer cited the Gaza conflict as motivation, though he said Shapiro's faith was irrelevant and mental health issues were noted by his family and attorney, NPR has reported. The attack, which caused millions in damage, has heightened concerns over political violence and prompted ongoing efforts to repair and strengthen security at the residence. Madagascar's military leader, Colonel Michael Randrianarina, announced Wednesday that he is, quote, taking the position of president following a coup that ousted the president, Andry Rajoelina. Randrianarina said he expects to be sworn in after the High Constitutional Court invited him to assume leadership while Rajoelina fled for his safety amid the uprising. The takeover follows weeks of youth-led protest over government failures, with Randrianarina promising to quickly appoint a new prime minister and form a government. Rajoelina has denounced the move as an illegal coup, and analysts have urged the African Union and international community not to recognize the military leadership, the AP has reported. Madagascar has a history of coups and political instability, compounded by persistent poverty and infrastructure challenges. All right, it's 9 past the hour, and here's a look at the live weather radar from the National Weather Service. And now let's go right into our national weather forecast for today. A low-pressure system moving from the Great Basin toward south-central Canada will bring unsettled weather across much of the U.S. this week. Showers and thunderstorms are expected over the northern and southern plains, the upper Great Lakes, and the central to the southern Rockies on Wednesday and Thursday. Heavy snow will impact the Sierra Nevada on Wednesday and the northern Rockies on Thursday into Friday. Rain will develop across central California and the northern Central Plains, the middle Mississippi Valley, and the Great Lakes through Thursday. Additionally, onshore flow will produce rain over the Pacific Northwest Thursday into Friday, keeping much of the northern and western U.S. unsettled. Violent clashes between Hamas and rival groups in Gaza have intensified, including a disturbing incident reportedly involving the public execution of 8 blindfolded men in Gaza City's Al-Sabra neighborhood. Videos shared on social media, some from Hamas-affiliated channels, show masked fighters, some wearing Hamas headbands, dragging, assaulting, and ultimately shooting the detainees while large crowds watch. While the timing of the execution cannot be independently confirmed, wartime damage in the footage suggests that it occurred after the recent Israel-Hamas ceasefire, CNN has reported. Palestinian authorities and human rights groups condemned the killings as, quote, heinous crimes and violations of human rights, while Hamas-aligned factions defended the action as part of a, quote, security campaign against collaborators and criminals. The incident underscores the growing lawlessness and brutality in Gaza, following Israel's partial withdrawal from the territory. The U.S. government has seized nearly $15 billion in Bitcoin and charged Chen Zhu, a UK-Cambodian businessman and Prince Holding Group chairman, with wire fraud and money laundering in what the Justice Department calls its largest ever forfeiture. Prosecutors allege Chen and co-conspirators forced people to work in Cambodian cyber scam centers, running, quote, pig butchering investment scams that defrauded billions, with proceeds spent on yachts, jets, and art. Chen remains at large and faces up to 40 years in prison if convicted, while U.S. and U.K. authorities have sanctioned his company as a transnational criminal organization, NPR has reported. Analysts note the criminal networks behind these scams, often linked to Chinese groups, have proven highly adaptable, using satellite internet, solar power, and new online payment systems to evade enforcement. Officials said the coordinated action sends a strong global signal against cyber-enabled financial fraud and human trafficking ahead of the upcoming Asian Summit. Kenya's former Prime Minister and longtime opposition leader, Raila Odinga, has died at the age of 80, following a cardiac arrest during a morning walk in India. Widely regarded as a key architect of Kenya's modern democracy, Odinga ran unsuccessfully for president 5 times, including the contentious 2007 election that sparked deadly ethnic violence. President William Ruto declared 7 days of national mourning, calling Odinga, quote, the father of our democracy, and praising his lasting impact on the nation. Odinga played a central role in ending Kenya's one-party rule back in 1992 and championed the progressive 2010 constitution, driving major political reforms, NPR has reported. Even in recent months, he remained influential, brokering a political deal with Ruto after youth-led protest, cementing his legacy as a powerful political figure and national unifier. Madagascar's military has taken control of the country following the parliament's vote to impeach President Andry Rajoelina amid weeks of youth-led anti-government protest. Colonel Michael Raindrainarina announced that the military would govern alongside a transitional committee for up to 2 years, suspend key institutions, and organize a referendum and elections to establish a new government. Rajoelina, who fled the country after an elite military unit joined the protest, denounced the takeover as an attempted coup and claimed he remains fully in office. The anti-government demonstrations, led by Gen Z groups, began over water and power shortages, but expanded to broader grievances over poverty, the cost of living, and corruption, Al Jazeera has reported. Crowds in the capital city reportedly welcomed the military's announcement, while the police also aligned with the demonstrators. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu expressed hope for a peaceful next phase in the Israel-Hamas deal, emphasizing that Hamas must disarm and demilitarize, or, quote, all hell breaks loose, echoing U.S. President Trump's warning. The agreement, brokered by the Trump administration, secured the release of all 20 living Israeli hostages in exchange for nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners, while Hamas has begun returning the remains of deceased hostages. Netanyahu stressed that demilitarization requires ending weapons production and smuggling into Gaza, but Hamas has so far refused to relinquish arms. The plan also calls for Israel's withdrawal from parts of Gaza and the immediate delivery of aid, though border issues like post-war governance and Palestinian statehood remain unresolved, CBS News has reported. Netanyahu highlighted Israel's past peace efforts, including the Abraham Accords, framing the current deal as an opportunity to expand regional stability and benefit both Israelis and Palestinians. Finland and Sweden announced plans to buy more U.S. weapons to support Ukraine, amid concerns that Western military aid has dropped sharply in recent months. The purchases fall under NATO's Prioritized Ukraine Requirements List, a program coordinating regular deliveries of arms and ammunition to Kyiv, with about $2 billion already allocated. Finland will also provide its own separate military equipment, while Sweden encouraged other Nordic and Baltic countries to contribute additional support. Data from Germany's Kiel Institute shows aid to Ukraine fell 43% in July and August when compared to the first half of the year, raising alarms about declining Western backing, the AP has reported. NATO officials and allied defense ministers emphasized the need for all members to share the burden, though countries like France, Italy, and Spain have been criticized for contributing less due to debt and economic priorities. Authorities in Indonesia have raised the alert to the highest level after Mount Letobe Laki-Laki erupted, sending ash about 6.2 miles into the sky. No casualties or damage were immediately reported, but residents and tourists on Flores Island have been warned to stay clear and prepare for potential evacuation. The volcano erupted twice early on Wednesday, with authorities advising people to remain at least 3.7 to 4.3 miles away and warning of possible volcanic mud flows if heavy rain occurs. The eruption has disrupted operations in multiple airports and will remain closed until Thursday, Al Jazeera has reported. Indonesia, home to over 120 active volcanoes along the Pacific's Ring of Fire region, previously saw deadly eruptions at Luatobi, including one in November of 2024 that killed 10 people and damaged thousands of homes. At least 20 people were killed when a bus caught fire on a highway in western India. Smoke was first noticed from the back of the bus, and despite the driver stopping and urging passengers to evacuate, the fire spread rapidly, trapping many inside. Police suspect an electrical short caused the blaze and that a jammed door prevented passengers from escaping, contributing to the high death toll. 15 others, including 4 women and 2 children, were hospitalized with burns, while locals assisted in rescue efforts, CBS News has reported. Prime Minister Narendra Modi expressed condolences and announced compensation of 200,000 rupees for families of the deceased and 50,000 rupees for the injured. A fire and explosion on a crude palm oil tanker at a shipyard in Indonesia killed at least 10 people and injured 21 others on Wednesday. The blaze erupted on the ship's gas tank while repair workers were still on board, followed by a powerful explosion that caused panic. 4 of the injured are in critical condition, and relatives gathered at hospitals seeking information about loved ones, the AP has reported. The tanker, which was built in 2009, had a similar accident in June that killed 4 and injured 5, reportedly caused by welding sparks and smoke inhalation. Authorities are investigating the cause and possible negligence by the shipyard operator. Syria's interim leader, Ahmed al-Sharaa, visited Russia for the first time, meeting with President Vladimir Putin to discuss cooperation and regional developments. The visit signals Russia's intent to maintain ties with Syria's new leadership and secure its military bases on the Syrian coast. Despite supporting Assad for years, Moscow granted him asylum after his ouster and did not intervene against the rebel offensive. Both countries emphasized their historic relationship and ongoing cooperation, particularly in energy and strategic matters, the AP has reported. For Syria, ties with Russia aid reconstruction and foreign policy diversification, while for Moscow they preserve its Mediterranean military presence and influence in the Middle East. Today is October the 15th of 2025, and on this day in history, in the year 1582, the Gregorian calendar was first adopted, and in some countries, October the 4th was immediately followed by October the 15th. In the year 1928, Scottish inventor John Baird demonstrated the first color television transmission. And in the year 1966, the Ford Motor Company introduced the Ford Bronco, a new sport utility vehicle. October the 15th is also National Grouch Day. All right, it's 20 past the hour, and let's do a quick market update. The Nasdaq is up 0.82%. Gold is up 1.25%. Oil is down 0.74%. Bitcoin is down 2%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 0.28%, and the S&P 500 is up 0.56%. Oh, and by the way, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can stay up to date on all of our news stories. Now let's go into our top national news stories for today. A Florida judge temporarily blocked the transfer of prime Miami land for President Donald Trump's planned presidential library after an activist claimed that Miami-Dade College violated the state's open government law. The lawsuit argued that the board failed to provide adequate public notice for its September vote to give the land to the state, which later approved its transfer to the Trump Foundation. The nearly 3-acre property is valued at over $67 million and is considered highly desirable by developers. Attorneys for the activists emphasized the public's right to know about significant decisions, while the college's lawyers argued they complied with the law and questioned the plaintiff's motives, NBC News has reported. The injunction delays the transfer, potentially costing the college up to $300,000. 2 Venezuelan migrants were arrested in Chicago after ramming a Border Patrol vehicle and attempting to flee, prompting a crowd to gather and clash with federal agents. The agents used tear gas to control the situation, exposing 13 Chicago police officers in the process. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker criticized the deployment of tear gas in busy neighborhoods, including near schools. During the operation, a 15-year-old American citizen was detained for 5 hours without access to his mother, raising concerns about due process, Fox News has reported. Attorneys described the boy's detention as alarming and linked it to tactics used in authoritarian regimes. Arizona Attorney General Chris Mays demanded that House Speaker Mike Johnson immediately swear in Democratic Representative-elect Adelita Grijalva, threatening legal action if he delays. Grijalva won a special election to succeed her late father, Raul Grijalva, but has not yet been sworn in due to Johnson keeping the House in recess amid the government shutdown. Mays argued that with the certificate of election transmitted, swearing in Grijalva is a ministerial duty the House cannot refuse. Johnson defended the delay, citing House custom and precedent, and said she will be sworn in when the House resumes regular session, The Hill has reported. Democrats claimed that she should be sworn in during a pro forma session, pointing to prior cases where newly elected members were sworn in immediately. Ashley Tellis, a Pentagon contractor and State Department advisor, has been charged with removing classified documents after over 1,000 marked files were found at his Virginia home. Many of the documents reportedly relate to Air Force tactics and techniques, and Tellis allegedly met multiple times with Chinese government officials in recent years. Back in April of 2023, he dined with Chinese officials in a D.C. suburb, discussing topics including Iranian-Chinese relations and emerging technologies like artificial intelligence. Tellis, also a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, made his initial court appearance on Tuesday, with a detention hearing set for October the 21st, CNN has reported. Authorities have not yet confirmed whether he shared any classified information with the Chinese government, but U.S. officials highlight China as a top counterintelligence threat. Alec Baldwin crashed his SUV into a tree in East Hampton on Monday, while trying to avoid a garbage truck, but neither he nor his brother Stephen Baldwin were injured. The accident damaged his wife's car, though, which Baldwin described as, quote, pretty smashed up. He explained the incident on Instagram, thanking the East Hampton Police Department for their assistance. Authorities said the crash was caused by Baldwin reacting to the truck on slippery, wet roads, and no summonses or injuries occurred, ABC News has reported. Baldwin plans to return back to Los Angeles to see his family and expressed pride and love for his wife, Hilaria Baldwin. Charles Crawford, a Mississippi man on death row for over 30 years, is scheduled to be executed on Wednesday for the 1993 kidnapping, rape, and murder of 20-year-old Christy Ray. Crawford's prior rape conviction was used as an aggravating factor in his capital murder trial, leading to his death sentence. His lawyers are appealing to the U.S. Supreme Court, arguing his Sixth Amendment rights were violated when his trial attorneys overrode his objections and admitted guilt against his wishes. The Mississippi Supreme Court rejected the appeal, stating Crawford did not present adequate reasoning for retroactive application of a 2018 Supreme Court ruling, the AP has reported. The execution comes amid a surge in U.S. executions this year, following recent lethal injections in Florida and Missouri. 2 inmates, Samuel Lee Smithers in Florida and Lance Shockley in Missouri, were executed an hour apart on Tuesday, marking a record-setting pace for U.S. executions. Smithers was pronounced dead at 6:15 p.m. local time for a 1996 double murder, becoming Florida's 14th execution of the year. Shockley was executed at 7:13 p.m. local time for killing a Missouri State Trooper back in 2005. October is on track to become the busiest month for U.S. executions since May of 2011, with 7 scheduled this month alone, USA Today has reported. Overall, 2025 has seen a notable rise in executions, with 37 inmates put to death nationwide, the highest total since 2014. Donna Adelson, 75 years old, was sentenced to life in prison for her role in the 2014 murder for hire of Dan Markle, with no possibility of early release. Leon Circuit Judge Stephen Everett declined to grant a downward departure, citing Supreme Court precedent, and added 30-year sentences on related charges to run concurrently but consecutive to the murder sentence. Adelson's attorney argued that she was only a minor participant when compared to her son Charlie Adelson and his former girlfriend, the primary masterminds of the crime, USA Today has reported. The defense also requested that any sentence be served near Miami for family visitation, but the court denied this consideration. Adelson plans to appeal the sentence. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell warned that a sharp slowdown in hiring poses a growing risk to the U.S. economy, signaling that the Fed is likely to cut interest rates twice more this year. Despite the government shutdown limiting economic data, Powell said the outlook for employment and inflation remains largely unchanged since the September rate cut. Lower rates would reduce borrowing costs for consumers and businesses, potentially supporting job creation and spending. Powell also indicated the Fed may stop shrinking its $6.6 trillion balance sheet, which could affect long-term Treasury rates, CBS News has reported. Additionally, he defended the Fed's pandemic-era bond purchases, acknowledging in hindsight that the program could have ended sooner but emphasizing it prevented a market breakdown. Kane Aaron Hammock, 33 years old, was arrested and charged with 8 counts of vehicular homicide and 1 count of feticide after a semi-trailer truck struck a van on Interstate 85 in Georgia, killing 3 adults and 5 children. The crash occurred when Hammock's truck was reportedly following too closely, causing the van to burst into flames. 4 other vehicles were involved in a chain reaction collision, including a van from Fur Kids Animal Rescue transporting 37 cats, some of which escaped or were injured. The victims' identities have not yet been released, and 1 fatality may have been a pregnant person pending autopsy confirmation, NBC News has reported. The Georgia State Patrol and the National Transportation Safety Board are all investigating the incident. Okay, everybody, that is our show for today. I hope you all have enjoyed it. I will see you all tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time for another episode of The News with BC. And until then, I hope you guys have a wonderful day.